Let's now take a look at the structure of a neuron. There are three main parts to a neuron: the cell body, the dendrites, and the axon. The cell body contains most of the organelles of the cell. The word nerve fiber refers to any neuronal extension that comes out of the cell body, and this would include the many dendrites and the one axon of a neuron. Let's now look at the dendrites. The dendrites receive stimuli, as is indicated by this arrow, and they send information to the cell body. So in other words, the dendrites can be receiving information from another neuron, or they could be picking up stimuli such as sensory messages from your various sense organs. The dendrites are typically short and highly branched, as we can see in this diagram. The axon sends nerve impulses to another neuron, a muscle fiber, or a gland. One portion of the axon is called the axon hillock, and it's shown here. The axon hillock is the cone-shaped portion of the axon where it joins the cell body. Knowing what the axon hillock is important for understanding neuron physiology. The axoplasm, illustrated here, is simply the cytoplasm of an axon. The axolemma, shown here, is the plasma membrane of an axon. Axon terminals are those portions of the axon at the very end of it. A very important term in reference to neuron physiology is the word synapse. A synapse is simply the site of communication between two neurons, in other words, where one neuron sends a message to another neuron, or it is the place where one neuron sends a message to an effector cell, such as a muscle or a gland. You might remember from the chapter on muscles that the name for a synapse where a neuron communicates with a muscle is called a neuromuscular junction. At the very end of the axon terminal is a synaptic end bulb. And these synaptic end bulbs contain synaptic vesicles, or little pockets, which store inside of them chemical neurotransmitters. And we'll talk about those neurotransmitters in a later section. You might remember from the chapter on the muscular system that there's only one neurotransmitter that will communicate with muscle cells, acetylcholine. But when you're talking about a neuron that communicates with other neurons, there's a vast variety of neurotransmitters. Here we can see a magnified view of the synaptic end bulb. This particular picture will be looked at in greater detail, and it's discussing the physiology. But I point it out here because you can see in it the synaptic vesicles shown here that contain within them neurotransmitters.